This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
We All Be is on the one and only, the truly beyond category Judge Joe Brown. How you doing today?
All right, sir. Doing fine. I hope everything is as well with you.
It's well with me. We just 2016 is a crazy year. 2016 has been out to a crazy start in terms of what's going on in the political landscape as well as around the world on the economic and other social levels. So how are you feeling?
Well, I'm doing fine. I'm a little nonplussed that Hillary has claimed to own us and that so-called Black Caucus has said, we're firmly in our back pocket. I don't know that. More people that I know are supporting Bernie Sanders than her for quite a number of reasons, but, she's going around telling us she owns us. One of the things I don't like that her husband did, which is caught up with the legal system, he's responsible for some of these acts that have resulted in such draconian sentences for so many young black males and the prospering of this privatization thing in the penal system. But that's another thing. I bet you want to talk about Scalia, don't you?
Yes, sir. Definitely. I want to get a chance to talk to you about Scalia.
Okay. Scalia is an interesting thing. He's had very little impact on American law because his decisions, those few where he wrote the controlling opinion, have been so, the only way I could say it, bizarre, that they have had very legal effect on day-to-day law. You read the opinions and you try to apply them and you say, what in the world is this supposed to do? It makes no sense. It gives no guidance to the judiciary or to the law in terms of what's supposed to be done. One of which, for example, was this thing where he wrote an opinion that said if a citizen is on a public conveyance like a Greyhound bus or something like that, and a law enforcement official wants to search the person, their luggage, and belongings, the officer does not need probable cause, reasonable suspicion, or anything. And if the person doesn't want to submit, they can have that person and the individual's luggage removed from the conveyance. Well, if you read it, you say it's dangerous because it could lead to political oppression. So sure enough, a few months after the decision was published, right here in this state, we had a situation where a couple of Republican sheriffs removed Democrats from several Democratic Party buses as they were going to campaign for the Democratic candidate for governor that year. And in retaliation, some Democratic sheriffs took all of the Republicans off of Republican Party buses, which is absolutely ridiculous. And as predicted, it led itself to political abuse. But he wrote that kind of thing that gave you no guidance. He also had a career of doing questionable things that gave the appearance of impropriety. In other words, habitually, he would enjoy the luxurious facilities of some company or individual that had a matter before the U.S. Supreme Court. So was this an improper exercise of influence or what? He was notorious for that. And Clarence Thomas would be in lockstep with him. Now, right now, Obama's within his rights to nominate somebody for the vacancy, but the individual would have to be approved by the Senate. And the Senate, thanks to a number of ill-advised policies by the Democratic Party, is now well in the Republican camp, and it's questionable as to whether a Democratic nominee would be approved. One of the principal things behind the scenes with what the GOP is doing in this up-and-coming presidential election is they're campaigning hard on basically one unified thing, and that is we cannot let the Democrats appoint another Supreme Court justice and tip what is now a 4-4 tie between liberal and conservative. They want somebody who is anti-abortion and pro-Second Amendment. And they've been lining up for months targeting whoever the Democratic nominee is for president on a single issue, which is the Second Amendment. I don't know why Obama has done this, because it's proved to be a disaster for the Democratic Party over the last 4 decades, and that is to bring up the issue when you have only a Democratic minority in the Senate and in the House of gun control, which is probably why that circumstance exists. That may be just his lack of experience with the American political system. But it's outright stupid for Hillary Clinton to be campaigning so strongly on an anti-Second Amendment platform the way it is perceived, because they're all lined up to bring in people sitting on the fence, and for a number of reasons to say, okay, you support the Second Amendment, she doesn't. So if she or Obama get a chance to appoint another Supreme Court justice, it'll be somebody anti-gun. And they're coming off of a decade-long, well, shall we say, period when the Second Amendment was strengthened rather than weakened, and they're very concerned about that. So the conduct of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in terms of their rhetoric has given them a very strong campaign tool for whomever is the Republican nominee for president. And you can put that on whatever presidential candidate they come up with, whether or not they are going to be pro or anti-abortion, which is very important to them. So it is not a likely thing that a Republican-dominated Senate with an absolute majority is going to approve an Obama nominee for U.S. Supreme Court justice unless he essentially, and this is one thing I'm curious about, whether or not he's going to appoint or nominate somebody who is a strong, moderate Republican that they would have a hard time opposing. That's not unknown. And frankly, looking at the current administration's 7-year history, I don't see what I would expect from a liberal administration. It looks almost like George W. Bush 1.0, even in terms of affordable health care, because that was an act drafted by Dr. Bill Frist of Tennessee, who up until 2007 was Senate Majority Leader. The Frist family started Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Blue M, and most of the HMOs. And these vouchers and the federal subsidies go to, I think it's 11 umbrella organizations that the Frist family controls. It's his bill. It just, for some reason or another, has become known as Obamacare, and I suspect what's behind that is the Republican hierarchy could not get away with pushing that act with their rank and file, who would probably rebel. You see some of them with 4 teeth missing in the front of their mouth, walking with a limp, 78 years old, one eyelid drooping down further than the other, and they think they're going to win the lottery and be multimillionaires between their 78th and 79th birthday, and somehow another creeping socialism will wipe out new millionaire status. But it is what it is. That's just an example to tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and you can get anybody to believe it. So Obama's well within his rights, but let's see if he nominates somebody who is going to be an individual that thinks of the common people, or is it going to be somebody that's supposed to be a compromise, but who is really a strong Republican. So you've got two people on there that he's nominated and confirmed, the two latest women, both of whom seem to have been consultants for Goldman Sachs, as was the Treasury Secretary, Geithner, as was Obama's stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, being one of their larger customers. And I'm wondering about whether there's an economic agenda that favors that 1% that Bernie Sanders keeps talking about. Mm-hmm. Because we think in terms of narrow issues, and the two that are out front are abortion and Second Amendment. So I'd be willing to predict that whomever gets nominated is going to be thoroughly scrutinized by a majority Republican Senate on the issue of gun control in position on abortion. So it's a good way to generate a fight, and it's also a good way to bamboozle the public if somebody is inclined to do that by putting someone who is a ringer in there for the Republican position under the guise of them being a compromise. So let's see what happens. It ought to be fascinating. The U.S. government was not set up so that for the last year of somebody's term, it's supposed to be paralyzed. So let's see what our good president does in terms of who he nominates to perhaps have some influence on the up-and-coming election this year, or to make a point, or to bamboozle at the other end of the spectrum. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's very important. Because I definitely want to ask you a little bit more about the Hillary situation and the campaign. But I want to focus in also because you are very much an expert and the trailblazer in the Dr. King assassination. You blew that whole conspiracy wide open, and we found out on December 8th, 1999, that the government was involved in the killing of Dr. King in a jury decision. But the Scalia situation, the way they found his body, the lack of autopsy.
I testified as an expert witness on ballistics in that trial you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
In front of the late Honorable Jane Swearingen in circuit court. The King family filed a civil action for damages.
That's right. And you did a great job explaining this to our audience a couple of times on my show. But I just want to ask you about what's going on with the Scalia, his death, because a lot of people talking in the media and online about the fact that he was not given an autopsy, the way his body was found, and some other things.
There's no need to. He's in his late 70s. He was in poor health. And for goodness sakes, what are you going to accomplish? Somebody got smothered. It'd be easy enough to conceal that with a natural cause of death. And this report about a pillow being found over his head is not to be taken literally as over his face. The description as it actually hit the hair was that it was placed above his head. In other words, he's laying flat on his back, and between the top of his head and the headboard is a pillow. So that's not saying somebody got smothered. That's like this black helicopter stuff, one world government and all that kind of thing. I remember listening to something on public radio, and it was a woman who was a clinical psychologist, an admitted ultra-conservative, and she had done some research, and she said that those who tend to be far right in their political orientation handle fear in a way that is quite different from those who are of more liberal persuasion. And they naturally tend to conspiracy theories. It's comfortable for them. It keeps them from having to accept things that are inevitable. And they made Scalia an icon. But in my personal opinion, actually Scalia had very little personal effect on American law because, as I mentioned earlier, His cases are so, decisions are so out there that they provided very little, if any, guidance to the practice of law and to the administration thereof. So if you can't do anything with them, eventually something will quickly replace them in terms of the law that's applicable to the particular thing that's being dealt with. He also was not very logical in his decisions in spite of the hype that he was supposed to be so brilliant. Now, I went to a major law school. I didn't do too badly when I was in there, and I've always made a point of picking out the fine points, and his so-called brilliant decisions were just confusing because of lack of clarity and perspective other than an ideological one, and I just didn't see it. And I've even heard staunch defenders of his eventually come around to saying, you know, I thought he was all this and that, but he just did not. What's wrong here? Something's wrong with this picture. This was a very poor decision. I said, yeah, that's what I've been telling you. You just believe the hype, and nobody reads this stuff except lawyers, and they can't do anything with it because it's not really on point. So he's just a passing phase when he got put in because of what he represented, a political position. Clarence Thomas got put in as a blackface that Democrats and liberals would be afraid to attack when he was just a ringer for a position. And Clarence Thomas went through Yale Law School. He did not do very well, and in fact, the rumor was that he flunked out of the place, which is just, that isn't done. And over a certain summer, he went around campaigning against affirmative action, and a professor discovered that, oops, I gave him the wrong grade. It should have been a B instead of a D. So he was reinstated into law school, and over the next couple of years, he spent more time traveling around the country attacking affirmative action. He got in after that in an attorney general's office where he was supposed to be in the tax department, but he spent most of his time traveling around the country attacking affirmative action. And then when Reagan got in office, his administration wanted to kill equal employment opportunity, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they appointed him as the director. And he tried to do a hatchet job on that, and then they appointed him as an appellate judge in the federal system, and he'd never been in a courtroom. So you go from there, you reward somebody like they did Scalia for his political position rather than his legal scholarship or knowledge, and you create a myth. So one of the things that is severely lacking, with all due respect, in this particular Supreme Court is they don't have justices who dealt with people law. In other words, sat on the other side of the desk with a real live client on the other side. They don't have justices who have a history and a career of being in front of a jury and convincing people of the merits of the case so you can see what all this theory is about when it comes down to practical application. And you don't get a chance to see what's going on when it comes to what is the effect on what you've been studying on the actual people that it impacts. We need somebody who understands people justice. We need somebody who understands that there are some things that have to deal with putting people back to work. We have the situation, for example, with the Supreme Court coming up with, I think, what is a grossly incorrect decision relative to allowing corporate entities as fictitious people to basically have unlimited monetary or money influence on the outcome of elections. That's very bad. So you see, these things are going to have to be readdressed. So where are we going? What's going to happen in terms of this trend in privatizing the penal system and turning over to private enterprise punishment function to be operated for profit? You put a profit motive behind criminal conduct and you make it an official profit, you're not likely to get any incentive to do anything about it. What's going to happen about entitlement for the very well-to-do and for corporate entities when it comes time for it to clash with such things as educational consideration and needs? Mm-hmm. What are we going to do about evening this playing field when we get somebody like Scalia quoting this particular hack of a professor at UCLA? And I say this with entitlement because I'm an alumnus. Mm-hmm. The professor he got it from is married to a colored woman, and he's got, I think, 3 little mongrel half-breed children, and he's going around submitting a friend of the court brief saying that black students would be happier at a second-rate school where they're not as challenged. Mm-hmm. You see, I think Scalia showed what he was about by embracing and saying that, and that panders to some that, in my opinion, and what I hear from out there, this particular professor with a black wife is feeling threatened by the alleged sexual prowess of black men, so he wants to belittle them by saying they're intellectually inferior. Mm-hmm. Well, I went to that school, so I could tell you that there are quite a number of black students that thrived in that law school who are now state judges, federal judges, elected officials, executives, and captains of industry and other things. So we did okay. Right. In fact, better than him. So, you see, we've got this thing coming up where we've got a backlash in America, and it's going to be very critical to black folk and other minorities in terms of who gets on this Supreme Court. So I doubt seriously that we're going to get a home run Jackie Robinson type character who will steal home base with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th and be that type of person. But I wouldn't mind it if it at least made a point. But then you got to find somebody who's willing to be the sacrificial lamb. But the main thing we need to watch out for is, are we getting a ringer who's going to be put in here to give sway and vent to what the Republican majority in the Senate would actually want? Somebody that will give them most of what they want with just a little smidgen to make it look like somebody was bargaining so you could get them in. In other words, what the Godfather said, hey, they give money off if you can't refuse. Hey. See, that's what the deal is. That's politics. But I think pragmatically, the last time that happened was you got Judge Anthony in the last year of the administration when they had put that rather farcical character Bork up, who was not confirmed for the U.S. Supreme Court. See, for example, you have this Bork is supposed to be a constitutional law professor at Yale. Right. Every law, by the way, that's the same place that Clarence Thomas was a student. And you see, every major law school has, I'll be charitable and say, an eccentric or a character on board so the students can see the contrast between a good professor and a crank. Now, we trapped Bork one time at a colloquium he was in attendance at, and he was preaching this thing about the anathema of judge-made law. Founding fathers intended the law to stay the way it was when they passed it back in 1789 when the Constitution was ratified, and or 1791 when the Bill of Rights was ratified, and that it was supposed to be unchanging and judges weren't supposed to make the law. Well, we blasted him with case number 1 before the U.S. Supreme Court decided unanimously, and I believe it was 1792. There's an amendment that says, no matter tried before a jury upon the common law shall be heard upon appeal except upon application of the common law. So the question was, since jury trials obviously are a fundamental part of American law, what is the common law? So the Supreme Court unanimously said, we hold that the common law is as it was defined in the case of etc. in 1661 before the English House of Lords, which at that time was 131 years old as a case. And we say that all law in the United States is the common law until it is superseded by legislative action. And we hold that the common law is, quote, that body of judge-made law based on tradition, precedent, and the evolving conditions of society, unquote. So all law in the United States is judge-made law until a legislative body supersedes it, and it's supposed to evolve with the changing conditions of society. So here's somebody who wants to be on the U.S. Supreme Court, holds himself out as a constitutional law professor, and he'd never read the first case decided by the United States Supreme Court that said all law in America is judge-made law until a legislative body changes it, and that this is supposed to change and evolve as the society evolves. So you see, that's typical of what you get with this dogma, with the big lie. Mm-hmm. I would personally hazard a guess and say there are probably fewer than 25% of sitting judges, justices, and lawyers in America that have even read the Constitution. They've studied it, but few of them have read it. So that's one of the things that we need to be aware of. In local elections particularly, nobody pays any attention to the judges, but the mayor, the city council, they can't directly impact you. They can't grant a divorce. They can't set alimony, child support. They can't sentence you to jail. They can't set a bond for you. They can't dismiss a case or instruct the jury or put you on probation. Judges do. And nobody pays a bit of attention. And right now in this area, we have less than half the number of African American judges that are involved in the criminal justice system that we had 20 years ago. So that means you have, with I'd say 3 exceptions, you have former prosecutorial types who have no link to or understanding of what's going on relating the African American majority of the defendants to the communities that they don't represent. You see, so that is a problem that is not addressed, and people need to pay attention to it. Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, by the great Thurgood Marshall, NAACP chief counsel, who relied on the SPCA laws for 35 years. What's the SPCA laws? Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. In other words, if you couldn't do it to a dog, you couldn't do it to a Negro. So he moved the state of law until you got Brown v. Board of Education that essentially outlawed segregation, which is why we are where we are right now. He became a Supreme Court justice. He was a Jackie Robinson. Mm-hmm. We don't have a Jackie Robinson on there right now. We've got a very weak person who was not a good student, never practiced law, and if anything, built his career around trying to slam doors that people like Thurgood Marshall opened. And as Thurgood Marshall said, directly referring to Clarence Thomas when he retired, he said, a black snake will bite you just as quickly as a white one. So it's not just about race, it's about what is the person going to do. We had a staunch defender of civil rights and voted for Thurgood Marshall's position on Brown v. Board of Education, Justice Black, who at one time was a Klansman.
Right.
But you see, he came around to doing the right thing. We had a Republican governor of California, Earl Warren, and he honchoed that thing through there and some other civil rights stuff. We had William Douglas, who was a labor man, and he got stuff through. So you see, it's not just necessarily somebody's race. It's what's going on with where their head is. Now, Obama in his first term, first 2 years, I was surprised he didn't appoint a viable black to, offset that sorry Clarence Thomas, with all due respect. But he didn't, and he got two people who were consultants for Goldman Sachs, big-time, high financial banking, So where are we going with this thing? Let's see what happens. And one grudge I've got is I don't like it when somebody claims me. And they've been dragging people out to show that Hillary has got a lock on black folk. I guess that's supposed to take the weak-minded of us and say, well, your House Negro leadership has said she owns us, so, go vote for her. Well, that makes me say, oh, hell no. So I'm supporting Bernie Sanders, and Sailboat, that's what I call her, because she goes nowhere the wind doesn't blow her, has been trying to name and claim us. And quite frankly, I haven't heard any policy about putting us back to work that I think is going to work. I have not heard anything about changing this situation with privatization of the penal system and these draconian sentences for African-American males. Some of us need to be under the jail, but a lot of us don't need to be in there. And her husband is a good source of blame as to why that is the way it is now.
Right.
With due respect to Bill, but he did some things that weren't cool. What about policies that are going to take the American working class and train it so it is not going to be obsoleted by industrial technology and computerization? You see, I haven't heard her talk about these things. In one movie I think everybody ought to go see, which is a pretty good war movie, Before They Vote in this March primary while it's still at the theaters. Go to the Paradiso or the Majestic, see 13 Hours. The right wing was talking about Benghazi and this dead American ambassador. When I first started looking at the movie, I had no idea that was what they were doing. I said, wait a minute. Is this what they were talking about? See, they came at the public the wrong way. If you had actually explained what happened, this is one of the worst examples of dereliction of duty and incompetence I've ever seen. And they don't even mention her. You'd have to have done your homework to realize she's responsible for that debacle. They had 6 people who were private contractors to be the security for a CIA center with about 45 people. A mile and a half away, they had a secret little place that had been a luxury motel where this ambassador from the United States was supposed to be there secretly, and they only had 2 men guarding him. The weapons were where the CIA was, and the ammunition was where they had the ambassador. And they had some functionary who was trying to retire early, and they couldn't wake up the Secretary of State. Apparently, the person was not to be disturbed, so they couldn't bring in helicopters to get the people out. There was supposed to be a relationship with the Libyans, and you didn't know who was friendly and not. They had gunships right on call, but they couldn't use them because they didn't have an okay from the State Department to do that. This thing goes on over an 8-week period, and the people that they brought in as private contractors were trying to say, hey, we need to do this. You don't have permission to do this. Well, you know, we're sitting ducks if this happens. So, you know, when you say, is this what they were talking about? This is a disgrace. And if this is the kind of thing that you could expect from somebody being the chief executive, you don't need to let them anywhere near having finger on the button of being in charge. This is gross. But you see, check that movie out, 13 hours. It's a pretty good war movie. They spend too much time dramatizing the operative's thoughts about the family. I don't think that needed to be in the war movie, but it's an interesting movie, and it says a lot about the circumstances. But I think you need somebody in there, not just because they would be the first woman in the White House. You need somebody in there to turn this thing around about lack of education, exploitation of the working class and middle class for the benefit of the very few, the sorry foreign policy that we've had where everybody acts like there's no such thing as political science, this situation where there's no training for the working class to become viable in tomorrow's economy, and for what I think is disgraceful to hear Trump and the bunch talk about what they're going to do for the Chinese, and the only reason the worldwide economy is still working is because the People's Republic has stabilized every important nation's currency by owning more of it than the nation does that issues it. They are a sovereign investment entity, and they've stabilized all of the stock exchanges. They've got 78% of the manufacturing capacity of the world. And remember that thing about the tainted pet food?
Mm-hmm.
They put 7 people on the wall and shot them for ineptitude. See, and I like that. The executive doesn't get a golden parachute. He gets put on the wall and shot. That's good policy. And
yes, sir.
You see, they are keeping things functioning. So when you start doing what they used to call saber rattling, I call selling wolf tickets, and start talking about what you're going to do to somebody that's enabling you to stay on a sound financial footing, you've lost your mind. You know, what's wrong with this picture? You see, Rubio bothers me because he's got so caught up in a personal thing. Castro did something to my parents, so I hate them. Instead of these, you know, reestablishing viable relations between the U.S. and Cuba right off of our shores, with Cuba on the same island as Haiti, you know, where we ran a whole lot of experiments in Haiti that we got away with.
Oh, you mean like the Dominican Republic, right? The Dominican Republic and Haiti share an island.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Dominican Republic. And, you know, you've got a big problem here.
Right.
So you want to keep these things destabilized and then in an abnormal condition because you've got a personal vendetta. Get over it. You're not fit for the office. Cruz is telling such big tales, it's ridiculous. And this thing about his citizenship, you remember this bit where they were talking about, did Obama actually have a legitimate Hawaiian birth certificate?
Right.
What that's about is citizenship. If either one of your parents is an American citizen and you're born anywhere in the world, you are an American citizen. Obama's mother was a citizen of the U.S. from Kansas. But here's the thing. That is established at an earlier part of the Constitution than the qualifications to be the president. When it comes to the president, you have to be a natural citizen. In other words, born in a colony before the Revolutionary War, or born in what becomes the United States, one of its territories or protectorates, to be a natural citizen as a qualification for president, as distinguished from citizenship by birth to a U.S. citizen. And Cruz was born in Canada. He makes no bones about it. That's what all that discussion was Obama born in Hawaii? Same thing. but they're conveniently ignoring it and refer to my earlier remarks. Only 25% of the people that ought to know better have actually read the Constitution.
Yeah.
You see, for example, you get grinning George W. Wacko Bush talking about the international war on terror. We have to fight terror, et cetera, et cetera. Well, under the Constitution, you can't declare war on anybody but a sovereign entity, in other words, another country. But Article 1, Section 8 says it's the duty of Congress to fund and the military of the United States to basically suppress and eradicate piracy wherever found in the world. And it's also, quote, the duty of the armed forces of the United States to enforce the law of nations, unquote. So that's UN stuff that we signed treaties on, and that's part of the supreme law of the land. The Constitution, laws to implement the Constitution, and such treaties as have been ratified by the Senate. There are many treaties the U.S. is privy to that declare hijacking an airplane to be a piracy, act of piracy. Therefore, since it is under Article 1, Section 8, the affirmative duty of the armed forces of the United States to eradicate and suppress piracy, hey, just like the Marine Corps hymn, shores of Tripoli, that's where the Marines went in and invaded the pirates' lair in northern Africa, Tripoli, to eradicate piracy. You go after Al-Qaeda and bin Laden because of acts of piracy. 4 airplanes got hijacked, 911. Not all this nonsense about international war on terror, but see, it's the big lie. It's entertaining, and you're trying to get somebody to go along with something that they don't understand. See, stuff like that needs to be brought back into the American consciousness. So, you know, we like to watch Ride Along 2 with Amos and Andy, and 50 Shades of Black with Step and Fetch It, and Tyler Perry and Bojangles, you know, but we need to pay attention to what impacts us day to day. Too many of us are going to prison and becoming the grist for a highly profitable industry. Too many of us are not getting man training because of the breakdown in the family that's being encouraged. And too many of us do not pay attention to voting and give away a right a lot of people have died for. Another thing, look at what you get with some of what the people are saying. Trump wants Apple to hack into the computers, into the cell phones of the 2 people responsible supposedly for the 14 dead folk in California. Now, okay, sounds like safety. But that's just 14 people. Think of the several 100,000 people who died in American history in war, civil rights, trying to do the right thing, opening up the frontier so you could get freedom and liberty. So you want to give that up for the collateral damage of just 14 people who will probably die many times that number in the future if you don't get somebody in the White House who understands effective foreign policy and not creating power vacuums, you see. So, I mean, think about what you're listening to and pay attention so these things that go over your head don't go over your head. You know what they're talking about. So when we talk about is there going to be somebody nominated to the Supreme Court, what are we going to do in terms of utilizing the opportunity to understand what they're talking about? Because that's half of the theory of good citizenship in this country, apprising yourself of what's going on so you know what the world is happening.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry. I just want to say, too, in addition to what you said about Yale Law School with Bork and Clarence Thomas, they also gave us the Clintons, Bill and Hillary. They met us at Yale Law School.
Now, see, the deal is that Bill was looked at Yale Law School as a hillbilly, trailer park trash. Hillary even said that about him a few times. And she is what I call not Tea Party, but tea time. She's a tea-time hippie, along with Nancy Pelosi, Feinstein, Hillary. They blow where the wind blows them, and they've got an agenda which is the best way to do things is to destroy the masculine component of the country because men are too manly. Now, we need to deal with the ladies, but, you know, it's gone a bit over. And for the last 10 years, irrespective of race and ethnicity, only about 28% of each year's high school graduates are males. And let's face it, that's why we've got so much violence in the inner city, because we have no fathers and no father figures. And excuse me, but can you recall any time when there was a take your son to work week? Enough is enough. Let's come back to balance. And if you've got a woman who will make a good president, vote for her, but don't vote for her just because she's a woman. That's why our problem with Barack Obama. See, he looks like us, but he went to a high school where the tuition was $45,000 a year when he went, excluding boarding. And when I thought about sending a son of mine more than 16 years ago to the same high school, it was $95,000 a year. It is over $100,000 a year now for tuition. That's not us. He doesn't have a father, a mother, a grandmother, grandfather, any aunts and uncles who went through the black experience in America through segregation, Jim Crow, Reconstruction, or anything like that. And he's probably the richest man ever to be in the White House because his adopted daddy, Lolo Sotoro, was at one time international executive vice president for Standard Oil and then founded his own oil company after being a reserve major in the Indonesian army in charge of the country's death squad. That means Gestapo. And you got an oil company and you run the Gestapo, you know, you get all kinds of things done. And you see, he's got a trust fund that Daddy Sotoro left for him and his two half siblings. So he's the richest man ever to sit in the White House. And CNN did something interesting. They ran a relationship chart. So you've got the billionaire Warren Buffett. You've got the crank former CEO of Halliburton, Dick Cheney, former vice president. You've got the actor Brad Pitt. And through his mother, you've got Barack Obama, all his cousins. You know, that's a different kind of perspective. You see, his mother's from Kansas, but on both sides of her family, you've got two Confederate Army officers who were fighting to keep us in slavery. So be careful what you buy into.
It's like with the Bush family, though. I mean, Granddaddy Bush was a Nazi. Or he financed the Nazi party, Prescott Bush.
Well, here's what happened. Yeah, but see, Prescott Bush is interesting. Okay. Most every bond made for Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights era was, you find Prescott Bush is the surety. Also, when Truman signed Executive Order 1981 integrating the armed services, Prescott Bush backed him from the Republican side. Prescott backed Eisenhower when it came time to turn out Joe McCarty, that right-wing crank that was running around singing a commie under every rock. You see, so the Bush family made their fortune on what they call paper entrepreneurialism. You don't run a business, you buy a business, or you get control of businesses, and you make your money by selling off and destroying the business. Now, right after World War I, Prescott's daddy, who was a protege of Rockefeller and Carnegie, was made the CEO of a consortium they put together after they bought control of the German armaments industry after World War I. So all the way up to and through World War II, the Bush family was managing this German arms consortium, and a lot of that factories that they were responsible for operating or managing, guess what, didn't get bombed. And the theory was is the Bush family supplied intelligence, and as a result of that, they left their stuff alone. So the Bush family has been supplying I Spy stuff to the American government for 100 years, and you know, Bush, George Herbert Walker, was head of the CIA, which meant he dealt with Lolo Soetoro, who ran the death squads in Indonesia and did contract work when the CIA wanted someone taken out in the Southwest Pacific. And see, Lolo did a lot of stuff with Halliburton, a lot of stuff with British Petroleum, financed by Goldman Sachs. And if you want to deal with Halliburton, see, it's not Dick Cheney. It's because George Herbert Walker in 1946 founded Halliburton in Oklahoma. It had originally been founded in 1919 and went bankrupt, or belly up, it just went defunct. And George Herbert Walker, also known as Uncle Herbie, to George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush president, and to great Uncle Herbie, to George W. Wacko Bush and Jeb Bush, you know, founded Halliburton. So Halliburton is a Bush-Walker family enterprise, and most of this is held by a holding company chartered in Kuwait known as Zapata Offshore Oil. That because of the mass number of Bushes and Walkers that have an interest in it is exempt from the must-be-sold provisions of the conflict of interest statutes that pertain to high elected officials in the U.S. government or high appointed officials. So, you know, Dick Cheney and Obama are cousins, along with Warren Buffett, and they trace a common ancestor, somebody that was a Huguenot, was brought over as an indentured servant, freed white slave from France. So, you know, an interesting family hookup. So, by the way, that sounds conspiratorial, but it's out there as public record.
Right. They say that actually explains the fiction.
Yeah. So, you see, you got to get a complete picture. That law firm that Barack and Michelle worked for happens to be the oldest Republican law firm in America. They're so old, it seems they literally financed Abraham Lincoln's first run for president. Wow. And that used to be Daddy Soetoro's American representative. And by the way, Barack went through school as Barry Soetoro, not Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
You see how that runs down. There's an interesting confluence of interest and blood relationships amongst the high and mighty right now.
Right. That's true, like you say, with the royal family in Europe or with the Rothschilds of Europe. Well, actually,
check it out. It isn't just Jeb Bush, George Wacko Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush. It's the three of them plus, you know, Dick Cheney plus, guess what? Barack Obama, through his stepdaddy, Lolo Soetoro, who did business with all of them.
They say blood is thicker than water, or thicker than oil, I guess. But let me ask you this, Judge Brown. Let's say if you got the call from President Sanders or even Obama to be a Supreme Court justice, would you do it?
I wouldn't.
Why?
I can't stand that kind of stuff. It's like studying for finals 5 days a week. 52 weeks out of the year. I deal with people. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be something else, and I had a physics major. And thanks to Ronnie Reagan screwing up the financial situation for the University of California, I would have had to wait an extra year. So my advisor said, you can declare political science and get out right now. So it's kind of, what are you going to do? I don't know. Be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a lawyer. So, but here I am 45 years later. So it is what it is. I mean, life's like that sometimes. Who knows? So, no, I don't want to be on anybody's Supreme Court. That means you can't be political, talk about the things I'm talking about right now, unless you're Anthony Scalia, who got a pass from the right wing.
Right.
You see, so wow, he whoop-de-doo. And then you do recall that little scandal where he was on somebody else's hunting preserve and he completely forgot about gun safety and got so anxious to shoot something, he shot one of his hunting companions in the face.
It was Dick Cheney, right? You talking about Dick Cheney, not
Dick
Scalia.
Cheney, but also you got the same kind of thing with AntonIN Scalia, another one. They get careless. See, that's that little skirt around the stuff about why are you at somebody's ranch hunting and they've got a case in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And see, Dick Cheney did it too, you know, and he shot somebody. But what I'm trying to say is it's similar situations and circumstances because they are above the law. Right. We need to get somebody who's not one of these right-wing types. I don't care whether he's white or black. We need somebody who is ordinary people and has not only compassion for, a passionate concern for the people who are in the middle of this country that make it work. They are not fodder for somebody else to live a lifestyle that is out of control. For example, if you're a billionaire and you spend $100,000 a day, you can't spend all your money in 300 years. Just think about that.
Right.
So, you see, we've taken away the ability for the Republic to recoup what they get. Used to be, okay, Daddy came up with an enterprise and he's got 20-some thousand people employed and he's got a product that is important to the American economy. He got to use the courts of America, the police of America, the armed forces of America, so some foreign entity didn't take over his foreign enterprises that were associated with the American one. Well, good for him. He got tax breaks because he did something. But when he dies, they took most of it away. And as far as Junior was concerned, it was that old rule, leave your children enough to do something with, but not so much that they don't have to do anything. So let Junior get a stake and build it up. Nowadays, they took that away. It used to be when you bought a share of stock, you were concerned about, is this viable? Am I going to be able to live off the collective dividends? I've got to hold this 6 months or IRS is really going to kick my behind if I sell it before I've had it 6 months on a very high tax rate. But if I keep it 6 months, I get taxed at only 1/2 of what I got as a gain at a very low rate. So you picked market shares or items that were viable in the market that make you some money. Now they don't care. They want volatility, and they've got a computer that'll buy, sell, trade hundreds of thousands of shares in a second. And there's no penalty. And what they want simply is to enhance profitability with no thought about whether it does anything for the economy. And then you've got the likes of Goldman Sachs that are not required to have any money to back up their accounts that are allowed to do the sham financing. Well, they say, we'll put up $21.8 billion to financially back this, and they don't have one red cent in the bank to cover it. But they're allowed to do it, and if they run into a problem, the U.S. government bails them out. $700 billion for the bailout bill, which is the second largest expense in the country's history, and $781 billion for the Economic Incentive Act, which is what they needed to get what they required so they wouldn't go under. And that was by Geithner, who was consultant for Goldman Sachs. See, so those are the two biggest bills ever passed in U.S. history. In fact, together, they are more than the entire U.S. World War II budget adjusted for inflation and the current economic circumstances. That's how much money it is.
Wow.
So, you see, what did they do? There are 10,000 people involved. Why didn't they put it in front of a federal court after the feds filed for involuntary bankruptcy against these companies since they had a big stake in them. And you could have appointed some GS-14s as receivers to operate the thing without having the travesty that Geithner into the Incentive Act, which allowed the failed executives to pay their bonuses out of the money that the U.S. government put up.
Wow.
And we're talking about budget doesn't balance. And then, see, starting with the Reagan administration, we haven't corrected what St. Ron the Reagan did. Nixon normalized relationships with the People's Republic of China. And in 1981 and 82, when Reagan's administration got those tax breaks for the biggest companies, so you paid more taxes than IBM, Boeing, North American, Rockwell, TRW, General Motors, not percentage-wise, but in actual dollars. How did they get that covered? They borrowed trillions of dollars from the People's Republic of China. And when the first 25-year interest payment became due in 2007, we couldn't pay them because we couldn't afford it. We couldn't pay the 2008 25-year payment. We couldn't pay the 2009, the 2010. And what did we do? During the last 7 years, the U.S. government has borrowed trillions of dollars more from the People's Republic. So where do you think that puts us? We can't even pay the interest from almost 30 years ago. So what's that say about, 33 years ago? So what's that say about right now when we're borrowing more money? Is that fiscal responsibility? No. That's what we're getting told is okay without anybody mentioning it. And our news media doesn't understand it, so they don't even look at it.
You know, it was interest right now. We're in Black History Month. We talking about our relationship with China. Richard Nixon would not have been over there if it wasn't for like somebody like Robert F. Williams, who was a guest of China, a black man from Monroe, North Carolina, who was on the run from the authorities. So he went down to Cuba at first and started Radio Free Dixie. Then his family went to China, and he wanted to come back to the States, so he had to cut a deal that he'll give them intelligence information or connect them with people in the Chinese government.
What's his name?
Robert F. Williams. From Monroe, North Carolina. You ever heard of him? Negroes with Guns? Yeah, he was over in China at that time. He made a deal with the government to get back home. So they let him go back to Detroit and drop the charges against him.
Yeah. Well, see, the U.S. government does all kinds of things. Back in 1991, I had a first-degree murder case in my courtroom. It was an organized hit. What happens is there are 7 people approximately that struck diamonds down at one of these Federal reserves in Arkansas. Oppenheimer, De Beers, wanted to get a monopoly on the diamonds. They wouldn't give it to them, so they sent over a 4-man hit squad, and they shot 4 of them to death. Badly wounded number 5 were about to shoot him in the head, and some Memphis police types were on a domestic violence call the very next door. They rushed over, and the 4 guys just dropped their weapons, no fight. Well, we go through several weeks of trial, and we hear about Oppenheimer, De Beers, and diamonds, and we break for the weekend. We come back Monday, no trial, because the U.S. State Department is coming in and taking the prisoners out of the country and sent them back to South Africa.
Wow.
All this tribalism you hear about, what we were learning was that the only reason that diamonds are worth anything is because the Queen of England gives De Beers a crown monopoly, and 99.99% of all diamonds are in the De Beers vaults. And a $1 million diamond has maybe an $8,000 actual value because that's just the artwork of cutting the thing, because the most common element on the planet other than hydrogen and helium, hydrogen, not helium, is carbon. You know, so when you get this so-called tribalism we've been brainwashed to say is a bad thing about Africa, it's not tribalism. Oppenheimer De Beers comes in and says, if you give us the monopoly, we'll let you live, and you have to sell them to us at this reduced price, and if you don't, we'll send in your opposition, and we will finance them, and we got a lot of money, and they will do you in, And we will say it's tribalism because you color type don't know how to get along.
Right.
See, that's what's going on. Now, I had a chance to talk with two very, very impressive young men. Both of them are lineal descendants of Shaka Zulu. One's going to be the High King of Swaziland and the King of the Zulu, and his half slightly younger brother is going to be the Prime Minister.
Wow.
Now, they've had to kill their lions with a wooden spear, no metal tip at 13. And their father, the king, is going to abdicate when they get their grad degrees from UCLA and USC. But they've got one test to go. They get to pick which weapon they individually get. One gets a sword, and the other one gets a steel-tipped spear, and they got to kill a Cape buffalo, hardest animal in the world to kill. If anything happens to the king-to-be, then they automatically execute the prime minister-to-be. So he doesn't collude to make sure he's the new king. So they've got a strategy they're coming up with to propagandize Africa into a type of cultural unity, since they can't get the political, and reveal what Oppenheimer de Beers has been doing to the continent for 200-some years. So they're trying to make a difference. And if you talk about some impressive brothers, that thing that Eddie Murphy and Arsenio did with Coming to America, these guys can talk American throwdown dance and rent out most expensive club that you can see. It tripped everybody out when they thought this luxury hotel was the anteroom to the restrooms. And I thought they were playing until I saw some of their homes.
Wow.
But you see, they also are very astutely aware of what's going on and want to make some changes. So they can tell you everything about American jazz, black history in America, American political history. They can blow it down to you, but they also know about their own. So, you know, how many American young black men are this up on the academic as well as on, you know, you got to go kill this animal with a spear.
We know how to kill each other. We know how to kill each other.
See, and, you know, they invited me over there. I said, where am I there? They showed me. I was like, man, that's a nice hotel. That's just not the hotel, Judge. That is one of my summer homes in the Highlands where it is cool. I said, what? It was to see my brothers. He's going to be the king. And see, they got off of that and say, hey, man, it's down, brother. You got to come check it out. You can talk both ways. I said, oh, man.
All right. They multilingual. I heard that. Or they bilingual.
Yeah.
Well,
and they throw down.
Now, Joe, I want to ask you this about the Flint water crisis. It seems like, you know, I just want to get your legal point of view and also your personal point of view, whatever you want to offer about what's going on in Flint, Michigan. Because it seems like you can go to jail easier for dog fighting than you can for poisoning children. So I just want to get your point.
Well, see, what happened is Flint is a boom town because Detroit decided to expand some of the auto plants up there. And when they did it, there was a housing boom. This has been long ago. They use lead pipes. They don't use lead pipes anymore. And what has to happen is you inject the chemical in the water supply that isolates the lead and keeps it harmless. Well, it was going to cost either 18 or 48 million. I can't remember offhand right now. So the city got the business back from Detroit, sold it to a private concern, and they didn't want to pay the money to continue to inject the chemical to make it safe. See, so somebody needs to go to jail. But right now in Memphis, we got this thing with the smart meters.
Right.
See, you know, they talk about what it's supposed to do, but again, you know, city council, what did you do to us? You know, you've got this bond issue, but what happens if too many people opt out? Where's the money going? Plus, the other thing is to see, they tell you in the fine print they're going to sell all of your usage information to third parties who will market products to you based on what your perceived usages are. They will also be monitoring what you do when you're home and be able to, with some of these smart products they want you to get, be able to shut down your television, air conditioning when they want to do it. You will have these collector transmitters where certain people's houses, without being aware, with them being aware of it, will receive the signal that will be transmitted multiple times a minute downtown so they can monitor what you're doing in your home. There's no encryption, and anybody with a receiver can say, okay, this is a high rent district. This guy, has got very low usage. It indicates it's either nighttime and they're asleep, but the sun's up. So that means they're not home. Let's go burglarize this place. And then your burglar alarm or security system might not be compatible with what they have, so it's ineffective. Additionally, they're not installing these things with using licensed electricians. They're bringing in a subcontractor who brings in just ordinary workers who get paid $5 per meter, and your homeowner's insurance may say, oh, screw this, this is an electrical system, extremely hazardous, and you put it in by somebody who's not certified or licensed. We're not going to cover you if you get a fire. And then see, a lot of these meters are going to be at businesses where they have concrete or cinder block walls enforced by metal rebar enforcements. And if you install them wrong, you can get a short going on, which might not do anything until there's a heavy rain and you get moisture saturation or high humidity, and somebody gets shocked to death by touching a light fixture. See, so they aren't telling us what's going on. And the other thing is what about all of the people that'll be out of jobs who've been reading meters? They can't pay pensions to the city employees now. So what happens with them? And then, by the way, since it's supposed to be cheaper, why are the rates going up and who's getting the extra profit? You see, all kinds of questions go on. And you see, it's the same kind of thing going on in FLINT.
Wow.
You see, this is this thing of you get this okey-doke run on you about private enterprise, so you turn it over to private enterprise or something that has been government or quasi-government, and it's operated as though the main interest was profit rather than just providing a service, and you get people who are not qualified to assess it voting for whether to have it or not have it. And then look at what's going on government-wise here in this city. Look at what's happened to the representation that we used to have, because you've got some house Negroes who run around trying to figure out how they're going to cover their behinds for petty crimes that they have done, which render them, incapable of exercising independent judgment because they're getting extorted. You don't do what we want, we'll prosecute you. And then you've got a prosecutor's office that's not about to pay any attention to the people that are doing wrong. You've got all of this revelation of prosecutorial misconduct in the U.S. attorney who wants to be a federal judge, approved by what is perceived to be a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate, is not about to go after a Republican who may be ripping the people off. You've got all kinds of things going wrong that nobody touches. And you do remember over the past when you had a Republican U.S. attorney, all somebody black or Democratic had to do was look cross-eyed and they got indicted and had to stand in front of a jury.
Yes, sir.
See, we can't get anything done. This thing right here where there's no indictment returned for this Stewart matter in Shilling. You see, look at what happened with Rodney King out in L.A. This is L.A., not here. We are the majority here, not in L.A., but when that riot went down, the feds got on it and returned the civil rights indictment and got convictions. What has happened here? Nothing. You see, and why do we have the Board of Education dissolved and put in the hands of the county board? And look at it this way. You have 3/4 of the students in this county system are in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
But Memphis only has 4 votes. 1/4 of the students are in the surrounding county municipalities, and they have 6 votes. After this year, Memphis will only have 2 or 3/4 of the students, and the rest of the county will have 6 for 1/4.
Wow.
What happened to one man, one vote, and equal representation?
Well, the black leadership, like you said, the House Negroes that sold us out, and a lot of those black leadership people, they no longer in the system, let alone in the city. A lot of them left the city, the folks that led this charge about combating the school systems.
Yeah. And see, what happens is we've got a talent drain. If you're African American and you grew up here, you're not staying here. You leave.
Right.
Maybe you get sent here or come in because your husband or spouse has got a job with a national entity and they come here. But what are you going to do about retaining what you've got in Memphis? And see, the crime of it is that Memphis ought to become the new Chicago for the 21st century. You've got all of these economic entities in Europe that would love to cut down their shipping costs. How would they do it? They have these standardized standardized containers that go on trucks, trains, planes, and barges. So instead of loading up a container for a container ship that goes across the North Atlantic, where you've got icebergs, bad weather, and high fuel costs, you load up a barge at the factory, float it down to the Mediterranean. You float it on board a barge transport, which looks like a 1,000-foot-long streamlined oil tanker. It comes across the mid-Atlantic where the fuel costs lower. It docks in New Orleans. You flood the hold, drop the hatch, float 50 barges out, and you get them tows up to Memphis. And they aren't touched until they get here. They don't have to go through customs until they get to the world's largest barge unloading facility, which is on President's Island. You see, this could be a huge pond. There is a reliable workforce. There's no inversion layer for smog. You've got the Mississippi River that can be used for industrial grade water and power. You've got the center of the national transportation net runs through the main continental thoroughfare, I-40, where it crosses the main waterway, the Mississippi River. It's statistically cheapest to ship from Memphis, whether you're shipping the North in, Canada, the U.S., and or Mexico. So you've got FedEx, who's been allowed to dominate the shipping thing here with the airport. The commercial tonnage going through Memphis Airport is the largest in the world. The second largest tonnage goes through Hong Kong Airport, and it's only half the amount that comes through Memphis. There have been commercial entities that are begging to be able to ship directly from Europe to 4 miles away from where the main transcontinental thoroughfare crosses the main river and get the advantages, but they can't get in here because the leadership is locked into keeping the old stream majority, not majority, but the old stream big business interest where they are. And see, there are 5 things they're into: construction materials supply. They're into real estate acquisition, real estate development, and real estate management. So the people that have been making money, just like this thing down here where the pyramid, $85 million that Sidney Schlinker bankrupted a whole lot of businesses on, but the money went to the right businesses. We gave away to Bass Pro for 126 jobs, and we don't even get a percentage of their take. $35 million for Beale Street Landing that was built private business to operate a gift shop, a deli, and a bar. They bailed on it, and the city can't operate a bar. There's a giant catfish jungle gym. It's $35 million, but the taxpayers paid it. Hey, I thought private enterprise was the business put its money up and went for either profit or going broke. But here we put it up $28 million to this airline that wasn't even incorporated took the money and just took off and nobody did anything. Where's the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute on that? You see, the police, firemen, and the sanitation workers can't get their pensions paid because all of this money is going to subsidize these few businesses. There's that theater down there in Peabody Place that's closed up because they didn't like the movies. They didn't want to show the movies that the buying public wanted to see. So now they're going to give them $42 million to build another theater a few blocks away. I thought that was supposed to be the money. You got $22 to $23 million down in juvenile court and taxpayers' funds in a sequestered account that's built up over 35, 36 years, and it's being used as leverage and to finance campaign finance. See, $25 million will leverage out somewhere around $180 million. And there's an election coming up, 2016. See, we've got all of these things, and who's to look into it?
Wow, man. So you should be mad, are you telling me?
Well, yeah, but see, I ran for DA, but the bottom line they've got debold election machines, and they are already hacked. We're the only county outside of Haywood that uses them in America. They're so circumspect that California actually gave an instruction booklet to the market on how to hack them. All you need is a smartphone or a laptop or an iPad, and they give you step-by-step instructions. Why did they do that? They wanted to make sure that nobody else used the machines. But dumb Shelby County, we still use them. Norma Lester's going around saying the county election commission has to okay it. They don't. It's the county commission. The feds put up enough money in 2008 to completely replace the system. But the money is not as valuable 8 years later as it was when we first got it. And all that's required is, quote, we, the below-signed county commissioners, hereby resolve that the debold voting machine should be replaced, period, and sign it. And all you need is a simple majority. But we can't get that done. And you've got 3 black Democrats each year, not the same ones, who vote against it. So where are we? Now we would have to put up a little extra money to make it work. But it will be a lot of extra money if they don't do it. And see, when all you got to do is you make up a text to a third party on an iPhone, walk in, get 5 feet away from a voting machine, press send. The transmission is received through the slot where you put the card that sets up your ballot for your ward and precinct, and you hack that machine, and it'll hack all the rest of them in the precinct at 15 minutes, and within the hour, every machine in the system is hacked. So you do what you call differential vote count. You pick what percentage you want your candidate to have on the final tally. It will deliver it, 52.8%. That's reasonable. And then see, what you have to understand is the candidates' names are not in the machines. Every candidate has a number. So there are only 2 people on the ballot for that position, but you look in the machine and you got 8 numbers in there, and you see votes are scattered through all 8 numbers until the chosen one gets the correct percentage as determined by the hack computer. Based on Windows 2000, there's never been a firewall. There's never been a security system. There are no upgrades available for the thing. And here in Shelby County, we did not even use the company program. Somebody from West Memphis, Arkansas programmed. And the program has never been submitted to the state regime of tests to determine if it's reliable. And since Catherine Bowers et al. Left us as election commissioners, we haven't had anybody Democrat-wise to go down there and watch everything and say what's going on. So they just gotten away with murder.
Oh, wow. Well, Judge, I'm glad you on the case and you getting all this information out here. And I'm glad I'm in a position to amplify the things you are saying, because people are listening and people are hungry for information like this they can make better decisions in the future. But before I go, I want to know if you have any stories about Maurice White. Did you ever know him of Earth, Wind, and Fire?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah,
I did not know the older brother.
Maurice, I guess the one who started it, the one who founded Earth, Wind, and Fire, Maurice White from
yeah. If I'm thinking about the right group, one of the members used to be a janitor at my high school.
Okay.
He could sing and he'd do it and entertain everybody. We were on the football team while he was sweeping up the locker room. Let's see. Big guy. That wasn't Maurice White. That was another member of that group.
What was that? Philip Bailey?
White, tall,
mm-hmm.
dark. This wasn't the one, but Earth, Wind, and Fire had some nice mood music. But when I was in high school and college, we liked it a little harder.
Right.
Smokey and Mickey's Monkey and, so on that album. And, the Temptations and the Four Tops.
Okay.
That was more our style we'd throw down. See, I graduated from college in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
You can just go back on that. Earth, Wind, and Fire was easy listening.
I heard that.
It's not Maurice. I hate to hear that. But by the way, I want to give a head up to Beyonce for having the courage to come out and do that thing at the Super Bowl.
Okay.
That so many idiots want to say something about.
Okay,
Hollywood is forgotten about entertainment supposed to say something about the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
So when she had the people come out in the leather jackets and the berets and a few other things and the afros, that was cool by me. She gave some glorification to some people. Some deserved it. Some I did not think they did. But, it was what it was. So what was it? Giuliani was talking about.
Yeah,
she ought to be ashamed of herself.
Yeah.
But that ain't the problem. See, the other thing, too, is art is supposed to be political. That's the point of it.
Mm-hmm.
I used to win bets with the Hollywood executives on what movie was going to be a hit and what would be a flop. I batted 100. I batted 1,000. How did you know that? I said, because the movie that you tooted and gave the Oscar to didn't say anything.
Mm.
It was just, oh my God, the lighting was it was such a great, so what? You go to sleep on it. It was dull. See, like, for example, James Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
I like him, but you see, he's not Hollywood typical. He came up with Titanic and Avatar.
Right.
When Avatar was up for Best Movie, they gave it to Hurt Locker, which was done by his ex-wife. It was one of the lousiest war movies I'd ever seen. It was ridiculous and insulting.
Mm-hmm. Now,
the thing about Cameron is this. The deepest dive ever was when 2 U.S. Navy officers in 1960 went 36,000 feet down in the ocean in the Marianas Trench in a bathyscaphe. The next deepest dive was 32,000 feet, and that was Cameron all by himself. He went down there.
Wow.
He walked the walk, talked the talk. He's actually done the deep. See, he was an oceanographer. For years, the oceanography thing was a cover for doing secret missions for the U.S. Navy, i.e. I Spy, coming up with tapping in and hacking Russian cable communications or finding a Russian nuclear submarine.
Wow.
He discovered the Titanic wreck that he did the movie about. That was cover for finding and getting an investigation gone deep down on a Soviet nuclear submarine. He's the one that, and I expect a movie on it, on the Bismarck, the German battleship. He's the one that explored the battleship. So, see, he came into Hollywood sideways as an oceanographer doing documentaries with a real-world perspective instead of oh my God, I've always wanted to do this, and JT gave me this chance. Oh my God, I didn't know who I was until I read the script. You know, he's not like that. So they don't like him because he's real world. But they gave it to his wife because they admired some of the things she was doing about pushing the LGBT envelope.
Right.
So they gave, in fact, I made a motion, since I'm a member of the Academy, that if there is a conflict between the top box office draw and something that isn't, the box office draw gets the best picture. Now, you heard this thing about how many nominations a movie gets.
Right.
You know how many people it takes to make a nomination?
No, sir.
1. You get 8 nominations, that means there are 8 people that nominated it in 8 seconds. And see, there are 35,000 members who can vote. And there have been Oscars won where out of 35,000 who can vote, only 7 people voted.
Wow.
Only 4 of them voted for the Oscar winner. See, that thing is, that was from a day when you had this scenario where you'd walk into a movie and there were 2 movies. If you came in halfway through, you paid your 50 cents as an adult. You sat through the half that you didn't see. You sat through the 3 cartoons and the special news reel. You watched the second feature, and you watched the part of the first one you didn't see, and you left, or you could stay there as long as you want. So every Thursday night they had 2 new movies, and every Sunday night they had 2 new movies. So studios operated these theaters. So what happens is you've got, 150 movies a year that they have to make. Well, they were going broke when color TV started hitting it big in the late 60s, and then they came up with blaxploitation.
Mm-hmm.
So black folk put the financial capital forward to keep these studios operating, and they switched gears. Instead of you getting 2 movies and 3 cartoons, what you got is 1 movie where you had to get there before it started, and when it was over, you had to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So,
go ahead, sorry,
you see, and then instead of paying 50 cents, you had to pay $1.50.
Wow.
See, so what happens is the Oscars were set up so you could tell the public what they ought to spend their money on, because you got 150 to 300 movies a year.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, you don't have it now, so it's a little incestuous in crowd where they, oh my God, Tommy just came up with the most novel concept. Oh my God, weren't the paper moons just fantastic? I'm talking about Moulin Rouge, which had to be one of the dullest movies I've ever seen in my life, but it won an Oscar and all. Oh my God, it was just marvelous. Oh God. Like, please give me a break. If you were suffering from insomnia, go see the damn thing and you can get a 2-hour nap. And, you know, you can even eat a few handfuls of popcorn before you snooze.
That's right. Well, Judge, so
yeah, you know.
So you saying that black folks actually had a point about the Oscars being so white and not including or excluding black people?
Well, see, we keep bailing Hollywood out, and right now you will notice Ride Along 2 with Amos and Andy, 50 Shades of Black with Step and Fetch It, and then you go down to the Paradiso or the Majestic, and they've got 15 stages in there, and 8 of them have got a Tyler Perry movie that's abject foolishness. It's mind cracked, but we come in there and we pay our money. And see, one thing I would ask everybody listening to me to do, when you get a ticket to the movie, read it to see what movie. When they came out with Malcolm X, I was making people go see it as part of their probation. So also out at the same time was Beauty and the Beast by Walt Disney. So I would go down there and talk to people in line, and I said, check your tickets. And they got a Beauty and the Beast ticket instead of Malcolm X. So I'd make the studio manager come out and replace every damn ticket, because the money wouldn't go to the brother. it would go to Walt Disney.
Wow.
And see, I was down in Houston. They
Mm-hmm.
did that same thing. Somebody wanted me to go with them to go see that. I was down there to speak, and I went, same thing. Lines 2 blocks long, and they've all got Beauty and the Beast tickets. And they're talking about Spike Lee's movie was a flop, which, God, every time I saw it, that 2 blocks were the lines. And nobody's in there looking at Beauty and the Beast, but it got all the credit. So check this when you go to the show. There are all kinds of games they run.
Wow.
And see, they want us to do Step and Fetch It, Bug Dancing, and Stupid, where it's yuck, yuck, yuck. And see, one thing I like to do is, okay, like, for example, Deadpool. I love Marvel movies because Stan Lee always pushed the envelope, especially with characters like Captain America.
Mm-hmm.
He replaced Captain America with this guy in the movies who is Hawkman. And he had a black Captain America for 2 years, and Captain America is talking about he can no longer deal with America that's pushing a Richard Nixon, and you got a crook in the White House, or Ronald Reagan who is corrupting the American pageant.
Right.
Okay, I like it. So, you know, I like Marvel stuff and the Avengers. So I go to see Deadpool. Man, that thing is like, it's like, okay, if you want to do it, fine. That's your business. But it's nothing but a gay movie all the way through from start to finish with little gay innuendo.
Wow.
And they've got all of these 19 through 25-year-old boys in the show, and they're titillated by crude 15-year-old sexual innuendo type locker room humor, which is lame to put it, which is why you have the nerds all coming in there to get excited.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's like, you know, I won't say it, you know, this is general radio, but they've got these captions. It's like, I know they didn't do that. Like, put it here.
Right.
You want to put it, you know you want to do it. Go ahead. Like, oh, man, come on. You see, so, you see, the movies have the power to tell a story and get the point across, just like Shakespeare did, just like Greco-Roman plays, tragedies, comedies did 2,000 years ago, just like an old John Wayne movie did, you know. But then we started off bad 72 with Superfly, where everybody had an afro dashiki and going power to the people. And then 6 months after the movie was out, they showed it for almost a year, various places around the country. Everybody's got processed hair again, trying to deal with a pimp mobile and talking about selling coke. You see, you can change things around very quickly with a movie. Now, political science was a major I wound up with. They say you can establish a national fad, and this was with 1960s communication technology, inside of 6 weeks. So you see, the power of the movies and media can establish fads which can either be positive or negative very quickly. So we have stuff that just is bordering on stupid.
Yes, sir.
You know, we glorify stupidity. I saw Straight Outta Compton by accident. Okay, I grew up in L.A. I know Compton well. We used to have a joke that if you ever died and went to hell, you didn't have to get charged a long distance call fee for calling hell if you were calling from Compton because it was a local call. You know, but, you know, I did say, you know, all of these kids are doing it, so you get this pointless thing about glorifying the violence aspect without teaching him the manhood aspect of why. You see, one of our problems as a people is we don't know when or how to die. We die, but it's not for a purpose. It's just population control, postnatal abortion, you know, the drive-by, the drug OD. We don't die for stuff. We just die randomly. And when you glorify this, taking somebody's life, and you don't have a reason for doing it, it's crazy. See, I used to sometimes bring in a made man to counsel some of the people I put on probation, real live mafia. And they would tell these characters, look, hey, you talk about you want to be black mafia? No, we kill you. You know why? Because we take care of the old folks. We take care of the old people. The old men get their pension. The old ladies don't nobody bother. Don't nobody mess with the girls and the ladies. We make the neighborhood order. I mean, we do things with each other, but that's like old-time feudalism. You know, but you kill everybody. You sell poison where you live. We would kill you for doing that. That is not manhood. Men protect where they live. You tear it down. You the worst enemy of where you live. If you got an old woman where you are, their worst enemy is you. You're not their protector. You got a woman, her womanhood has as its worst enemy you. You got children. You don't even know what you leaving behind. You don't understand fatherhood, where it's an imperative that you raise the boy or the girl for the next generation. So you don't even understand. What are you? You know, see, and I would put them in there. It would be humbling. You ain't got nothing to die for. You ain't dying for no control of some criminal activity outside of where you live. You dying for some foolishness because you jacking where you are. It was an interesting thing, but see, too much of what we get is like that. I remember the first time I saw this. It's 1968. And there was a movie starring Fred the Hammer Williams. It was an unusual movie because I'd never seen anything like it. He was the hero, but he was a drug lord.
Come on, Black Caesar.
That was one of them, but there was another one that preceded Black Caesar.
Okay.
And he was selling big quantities of drugs. And the villains were another drug gang. And the movie culminates in a shootout in a warehouse in Long Beach Harbor. There are about 30, 40 dead bodies laying on the ground. The shootout's been going on for 10 minutes in the movie. And there's no LAPD coming to the scene. There are no police sirens. And when you finish up, he's retired, smoking a long cigar, drinking a bourbon. And they have glorified the criminal activity. You see, that kind of thing was an adventure, but it sent the wrong message to the black community because it was like the people that were pushing it had no connection with our community. They just saw us as a dollar figure to bail Warner Brothers, Paramount, Columbia, and Universal Studio out of the red by coming up with blaxploitation movies. You see, there was no point to these things. It was just you took something that was dysfunction and you didn't tell the people in the audience, you need to change this and do better, you know, because you'll die a horrible death or get thrown in the penitentiary. You need to do the right thing, which is every other movie in Hollywood had a message at that point. But these didn't. They were nihilistic, no points. And what you do is okay. What we do sometimes is not okay. It ought to be changed. Did you see this one, Baby Boy?
Yeah, yes, sir. I've seen it.
Okay, in there, in the end, you know, when you get to the director's cut, my boy is saying, Baby Boy is doing stuff that he thinks will make him a man. He's selling stolen women's clothes at beauty salons and stuff. And what's happening is he's doing things that if he ever decides to become a man will get in his way. His homeboy that takes the action is somebody that wants to be a preacher, but he's a homicidal maniac. You see how that thing goes?
Mm-hmm.
And then like his mother is dating Ben Reams played character.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben Reams is trying to straighten the punk out to act like a man. And he's saying, Mama, what you doing with him in my house? She says, what do you mean? Your house? What note did you pay? And then his girlfriend's got this car. Oh, looky here. This is my car. What you mean you taking away? Say, your car, what note did you pay? Well, I put these wheels on here. That ain't the note.
Mm-hmm.
You see, in other words, the point is that it's dysfunction. But if you watch the movie in a black audience, they don't get it. Spike Lee had one called School Days with Lawrence Fishburne.
Right.
And they had sisters that were the frat queens with all the blonde hair parked on top of their head. And it was a satire. He was making fun of it. And a woman sitting one row in front of me to my left said, girl, look at that. I need to have my hairdresser see this. That's what I've been trying to get her to do. And she got hair about 1 inch long. Like, yeah, what kind of weave you going to put in your head to get that way? And then when you got Lawrence Fishburne trying to talk to his girlfriend up in the dorm and they're talking sense, you've got 4 fat girls that had never had a date 3 stores down. Say, girl, talk to him. Don't let him do that. And then you can hear in the audience, I hear you, honey. Tell him what he had. Blah, blah, blah. You know, he's trying to correct you, and you're too stupid to even pick up the point. And somebody's saying, 2 down from me. I thought this was supposed to be funny. It's not funny, fool. It's a satire.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's maybe like a Chirac, right? With the Chirac, have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
There's a whole lot of black stuff I won't see anymore because it's just exploitive and it induces dysfunctional behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They did one that was a comedy with Eddie Murphy some years ago. It's called Boomerang.
Right.
So all the white critics said, what's the point of the movie? They act just like they're well-to-do upper middle-class white folks. So why are we watching this? Well, what the hell? Don't you think black folk can, you know, if they get an education and a good job, they can have all right life. They ain't got to go pimp, sell drugs, or go hoe, and, you know, hey. But, see, that's not supposed to happen. What is the point of this? You know, we don't get this. Why did they make this movie? It's just black faces on white characters. Oh, yeah, okay, fine, dude. Or in Hollywood, I dealt with this all the time. They'd want me to do something, so I'm going, why exactly are you trying to push me to do what I'm not going to do? We had one where this brother was in special operations for 18 years, and he'd been in the Army a total of 20. Okay, he decides to come out, visit his grandmama who lives in Brooklyn. But when he gets there, he hadn't seen her in ages, and they got all these crack dealers selling crack out on the sidewalk where these children are. So as he said, look, I didn't go put my life on the line and get 3 Purple Hearts to come back so you fools can sell crack and tear down the neighborhood. You be off of here by tomorrow. I'm going to deal with you. So he was candid. He said the only reason I didn't get a first-degree murder case is I couldn't buy anything but a lousy 32 in New York on the black market and 5 bullets for the thing. So he shot these 5 dudes. He did 9 years in the New York State Penitentiary. So when he comes out, he doesn't throw his money away. He winds up having 123 employees and 26 trucks where he's installing the satellite dishes for a major satellite network. And the lawsuit is because his ex-girlfriend claimed she loaned him $5,000 he won't pay back. Well, he took her $5,000, but he put $120,000 with it and set up an irrevocable trust for the benefit of her 3 children. So if they went to college, they'd get their college fees paid for, books and everything, and it'd be worth a bit more than $250,000 by the time they each hit 18.
Mm-hmm.
So she claims it was a loan and he won't pay her back. She doesn't get it. So he brought in the bank executives and the trust department to show it was legit. He bought her a brand new Buick. So she just wouldn't pay the tickets. It got towed. He got it out, got it fixed up, and she had to take a 25-minute ride on a subway in New York to get it. It was 40-some degrees, so she says it was too cold to get her lazy behind up and take her 9-year-old, 11-year-old, and 13-year-old kids with her to pick this car up. So it just went back to impound again. So she was complaining. He got her a 3-bedroom apartment, prepaid 2 years worth of rent in downtown Manhattan, and they're tearing down the neighborhood. And she's complaining that he won't pay her money back. So I'm going, don't you get this? This is an irrevocable trust for your children. He put in $120K, you put $5,000 in. What are you talking about? So they wanted me to award her the verdict, which I did not do because she wasn't entitled to it. But they were talking about this is anti-woman. I said, no, this is just being right. And all of these women that run up these multiple $1,000 cell phone bills because they were getting collect calls from somebody in the penitentiary. This is the guy that they were hoping he'd turn out to be when they accepted the collect call. Plus, he had offered to he hired a lawyer to get her a divorce. She'd been separated from her first and only husband for 11 years, but she didn't want to lose the benefits. So he just said, I'm tired of this. So he got a decent woman, married her. So this fool is hollering about he cheated on her, got him another woman. Yeah. He said, I can't, I'm not into this. I need a wife. I'm not into all of this instability, And you know what? He'd put up cash for this fool's 3-bedroom apartment. $250,000 he prepaid for her, and she's hollering about he owes her $5,000. And these fools that worked out there couldn't understand my point. I just said, justice is justice. I don't care whether you like to make a point. Well, we don't want to turn off the targeted demographic. I said, your demographic is people who are 18 to 24, who don't have a job, aren't going to school, and collecting a check. And let me tell you something. That may be the circumstances, but the people who sell these Mercedes-Benz and Cadillacs and everything else, the sponsors aren't interested in them. And plus, that's not a good message to send to anybody as to what the right thing to do is.
Yes, sir.
But you see, they wanted that because they thought that was the thing to do. They had an idea about us that I did not adopt, and I think I know more about us than them. So this is what happened. Chief Brown says this is the way we're going to resolve this village dispute. You don't get a dime, but, you still have 14 months left on this prepaid lease. I suggest you enjoy it while you can, because I don't think he's going to put any more money up.
Wow.
You see, so that's the kind of thing they'd want, just to make a point because somebody out there has an idea of what's happening. Our rap genre, a lot of people think it's exploitation of women, sexual fantasies, but that's not women that are their sexual fantasies. I had a 17-year-old kid on the show, and he was a minor, so his mother and grandmother were his next best friends. He won the lawsuit, $5,000. I put it in the trust fund until he got 25. His mother and grandmother are mad because they couldn't get the money. And what the deal is the mama's got a little hoochie mama split skirt on with everything showing and a little halter top. She's 8 months pregnant and a belly hanging over the top. And the grandmama, had just had a kid 4 months before that, and she has on some hoochie mama shorts with her butt cheeks out and a little halter. So I made wardrobe, put them in dresses. The mama say she resents that. Now, the boy was 17. Mama was 29 years old. And grandmama was all of 41 years old. She's just 12 years older than her daughter, and 12 years older than her son. So see, if you'd run into them, in fact, they sent pictures to identify both of them sitting out on the stoop in back of the projects with a 40 ounce in one hand and a cigarette in the other. So, you know, this isn't any sexual fantasy. This is what grandmama and mama look like, except probably they didn't look that good. So they're both trying to play hoochie mama, and one of them telling me all she's got to do is flat back and get a bigger check and get some of her children to give her the money that they owe her from her birthing them. So mama had, this was her 9th kid she was pregnant by, and grandmama just had number 14.
Wow.
So you see, that kind of thing is what goes on in our community, and somebody saying we have so little manhood around the industrialized world that we're selling this rap music in Sydney, Tokyo, Rome, Florence, Berlin, and, you know, we want a product that is, we don't care whether it says anything to the African-American community. Black males are supposed to be super masculine. We just want this as image so we can sell it down in Tokyo. You know, I'm in Sydney, Australia for 5 weeks. And in a nightclub where the only thing close to being black is Aboriginals, and they got white Australian up on the stage saying, "Hey, Mike, it's my Mike, tell me, it's Mike," and he uses the N-word. I thought, oh, man, wow. You know, but you see, they pay for and control what we hear that reinforces a negative that they can sell abroad for big money, and they don't want any change from the formula. So the rap artists, even though some of them want to put something conscientious out, they can't put but 1 or 2 numbers out per CD because the people that are paying for it don't want it changed, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this has been working 20 years. Right. You see, like, a friend of mine had a client who was a very, 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 very filthy rich multi-billionaire from a foreign country who also happened to be an American citizen. He had a little problem out there at this man's estate where he had a 45,000 square foot house and 35 acres in Beverly Hills. And it was a bunch of Beverly Hills high school students trying to play gangster with sag, bag, and drag and baggy shirts and baseball caps with the flat bill that fell in the ankle. See, they're looking for something that looks overtly masculine, but you see, we get the tail end of that because you're trying to sell a product internationally that we don't even get a piece of the play of and don't realize it. We're talking about in the hood, and that in the hood is a fantasy to somebody that lives in Florence, Italy. But they're listening to it. So what they want and what is being produced for their benefit is not conducive to making change. And see, music historically has been about advancing the envelope and what you ought to do after listening to it.
Wow.
We don't have that.
Well, Judge Brown,
I don't fault.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I don't fault some of these young brothers because they lock them into this industry when they're 15, 16, 17 to fill their head with ideation about how to do this. They're young boys that don't have any man training, and their mamas may really be hoochie mama like those two that came into my court. By the way, I won't mention the boy's name because he's an established rap star. Every now and then I run into him, and he says, "Judge, thanks. You opened my eyes." And I said, "Did they get in it?" They didn't get a dime.
I heard that. That's a blessing. Then you did the man thing. You taught them how to be a man. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Judge, I want to thank you for giving me so much time and so much insight and wisdom. I got a couple of questions I want to ask you, but I'll save them for a very near time in the very near future. But I want to thank you once again for being the man that you are and for doing the people's work. In the words of Great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. and keep on producing and pushing, sir.
Oh, yeah. I want to send out a little message here.
Yes, sir.
There is a CD set. I'm on the front. Got on a white straw hat, and I've got on a suit. I've got my arms propped up on one knee.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know this character submitted that for copyright on what I'm saying in there and is trying to get me to pay him $180,000 for it?
No, wow, no.
Or he'll sell it, and he says some of the rest of the stuff that wasn't put in there, you might be misconstrued as saying something racist. I said, so damn what? But you see, that's the problem. We can't trust each other.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'm going to be on the lookout for that CD cover then. You said it's a CD?
It's interesting, but, you know, it's just Turn It Up, I think, is the title of the thing.
But he got you talking on there, but he want to sue you for copyright infringement.
He's not suing. I just found out he copyrighted it in his name.
Wow. What people do, boy.
Anyway, see, that's the kind of thing you got to deal with. And if, you know, they're going to try to run that on me, think of what they're going to do on those 17, 19-year-old kids.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And was this recent, though, this incident? Was it a recent incident with you and this guy with the CD?
Yeah, that's just the last couple of weeks.
I'm going to have to check that out. Okay.
Yeah, I can buy it. It's a good CD.
But he didn't give you no okay. He want okay, it's crazy.
Yeah, I just said, you know, I'm talent. Talent gets paid. Talent doesn't pay production.
That's right. I agree with that. Yes, sir. And also I want to ask you, did they ever try to make you wear a dress in Hollywood?
Oh, hell no. There's no way in hell that would happen.
They ever asked you, though, hey, Judge, we think you look good to be less anti-woman if you wore a dress? They never said something like that.
Oh, hell no. I'm a man. That just doesn't happen.
So what do you think about Will Smith's song?
The clothes, look, like I said, it's Hollywood. You do what you want to do. That's your business, but I don't swing that way.
Yes,
the closest something came to that, somebody wanted to punk out and talk about, why you got that dress on? I said, you mean this black bat cape? I said, did you graduate from high school? No. What's that got to do with it?